More on the future of Fed Chair Powell at the Fed. Let's bring in Richard Fisher. He's the former Dallas Fed president and a Jefferies senior advisor. Richard, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. What's up?
If the whole point of blocking Kevin Warsh's confirmation vote was to protect the independence of the Fed, do you feel any better today versus, a week ago, let's say? If Jeanine Pirro can reopen the investigation, as she said, the independence could still be under attack, particularly when Lisa Cook is still in play.
Well, if I were Chairman Powell, I would make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed that would prevent them from going after me, and that he's really in the clear. And then secondly, he's safeguarding the integrity of the institution. And he has to make a choice here, even if they clarify this matter. What does Kevin Warsh in his testimony mean by regime change? He wasn't very clear, really. He talked about the dot plot. He talked about maybe not having as many press appearances. But it could be that Chairman Powell, protector of the integrity of the institution, could stay on. He's been elected chairman of the FOMC for the year. It's not necessarily the chairman of the Fed. Or if he's just a governor, that way he prevents some other, let's say, sycophant, like the one that Trump already put on the board of governors, being put on there in his place. So there's a lot of decision-making that has to be made. But first, clarification. Is he clear? Has every I been dotted, every T been crossed? If I were him, I would wait to make sure, and I'd have my lawyers, and his lawyers appear to be excellent, make sure that that is the case.
Richard, I guess it's very fascinating how we have, to some degree, perhaps, some kind of existential questions around the functions of the Fed as we've come to know them at a time when, maybe I'm wrong about this, but at a time when the stakes for near-term policy don't seem particularly high, meaning, maybe rates are a little bit above neutral, but how far is debatable. And it seems if the market's not expecting any near-term action on rates, the balance sheet's kind of static. In other words, it feels as if everybody is kind of comfortable with a wait-and-see approach right now. And yet we're talking about who might be able to exert leverage over this committee, however it might be composed.
Yeah, again, Warsh is a pretty smart guy. And if I were him, not Powell, you have a real fog of uncertainty here. And you also realize he's a smart guy, even though he looks at the Dallas trim mean, which we're very proud of here. And we perfected when I was president of that institution. There's still, we know, talking to businesses, there's a lot of inflationary pressure being built into the system. Supply constraints and also pricing power. And we're just going to have to wait and see. So he could come in, if he came in immediately, and not do a thing. And guys, I like to remind people that this is exactly what Harry Truman expected McChesney Martin to do in 1951, to cut rates. And McChesney Martin did not. And he was labeled, using a Trumpism, by Truman as a traitor to our country. Well, guess what? He was the longest serving in history. And Kevin has the potential to be the longest serving in history. He's only 56 years old.
Yeah, that is very young. Richard, I'm curious.
You're much younger, but don't say anything.
I am curious, though, if you were to speak to Senator Tillis, would you urge him to still block the vote, block Kevin Warsh, the proceedings to happen in order to make sure that Chair Powell is clear?
I would advise Senator Tillis the same thing that I would advise Jerome Powell. Make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. I don't trust Ms. Pirro in this case, and apparently either does he, either does Powell, and make sure that they're not going to come after him on some charge personally when he leaves. And until that is clear, if I were Senator Tillis, I would not move this forward until it's been made abundantly clear.